this presentation. So you'll have that if you want to download it, if you want to be able to take notes on it, that is available for you in the chat. You should just be able to open the link. If you can't open the link, then copy and paste it into your Google Drive, and it should take you to that document. And just interviews myself, I wanted to say thank you, Brenda, and all the staff of Peace of providing me this opportunity to share information about executive function and critical thinking. And this is about autism, but it's about intellectual disabilities. It's about any disability or not, because all of us at times struggle with executive function. And executive function works typically when we are in a good state, when we're able to, when we're not under anxious situations. And my dog has got her squeaky toy again. Ava, come here. Bring it here. Come here. She had a turkey earlier and I had to take it from her because she was squeaking and I didn't even realize it. Somebody had to tell me. Excuse me. I'm sorry. How professional is this? Come here. Come here. Give me your toy. Come here. Bring it here. Ava.
I got my dog to the couch and coming to see where the toy is.
And believe it, it is really, it's supposed to be shaving cream. And she had her turkey earlier today. So now I'm having to hide them because she gets a monthly bark box. And so they have themes. At any rate, I've got to hide them because she's going to drive me nuts. So again, thank you for the opportunity. Like Brenda had said earlier, I was one of the first founding members, board members of Peace some years ago. Darla and I have known each other for too many years to really say on while we're taping this, but our children were very, very young. We were, matter of fact, in birth to 3 and doing birth to 3 family resource coordinator type work. So I've been around. I've been doing this work in the field of autism, executive function, and universal design for learning for over 20 years. I have the impetus for my work has been my son, Michael. I have a 38-year-old son with autism, intellectual disability, and an intractable seizure disorder. And he has some other complex health issues. So what I wanted to start off was just that introduction, but then also just kind of go over, what to expect tonight. And the presentation, I'll provide you information about what executive function is. Please feel free to ask questions. You can either do that by raising your hand. If you go to the dashboard, you're going to see that you have the availability to do to be able to interact with me by either using the chat, or you can go to where it gives you an opportunity where it says emotions, where you can either give a thumbs up, you can smile, you can wave, you can raise your hand if you have a question. So those are all things that that you can certainly practice while you're doing while you're part of this training today. So that's what I'm going to challenge you with today is your participation at a level that maybe a little bit past your comfort zone. And I have a light here that is starting to flicker, and that's going to drive me nuts. Speaking of sensory processing. So hopefully you can still see me. All right, so let's kind of get into all of this. What is executive function? What we do know is that there are different lobes to our brain, And an executive function, it starts really in the frontal lobe of our brain, which basically are controlled by the skills in that area that are a set of a set of mental skills that help people learn and to complete tasks more independently, that they're able to organize and sequence a thought and action and be able to produce an outcome with knowing the consequences to this process and to your choice. So executive function is a multi-level, multifaceted skill that we can't always assume people are going to get. And matter of fact, somebody who has, excuse me, really good executive function one day might be compromised the next. And that I had just kind of mentioned before with talking with Brenda, that executive function can be compromised based on your state of mind, your anxiety, your really what part of the brain is starting to work. If you're in that fight or freeze, your ability to make decisions, functional decisions, critical thinking is compromised. And so we're going to talk about today what that looks like and what are some of the supports that we can do to help us know how and when we can have, how, when, and where we can use executive function. And this is not only related to a person with a disability, but to you and I. There are things that we do reactively, and there are things that we do with intent, and that all has to do with the function of our brain. So executive function is what it does is it helps organize and prioritize and activate work. It monitors and self-regulates our actions. It utilizes working memory and short-term recall. It manages frustrations and modulates emotions. It regulates alertness, sustains efforts and speed. It also helps us focus, sustain, and have the ability to shift from one task attention to another. So that's a lot that executive function does. And when you have somebody who has an executive function disability, there are supports and strategies we need to have in place. And then their executive function that's compromised, that we have self-coping mechanisms. And I'm going to be talking about both of those tonight. So the frontal lobe is the part of the brain that controls important cognitive skills like emotional expression, the problem solving, memory, language, judgment, sexual behavior. It's the control panel. It's basically your dashboard that, helps, send signals so that you are in control of your life. You're organized, you're on task, you're just clicking along. This is your dashboard. And in the frontal lobe, because the frontal lobe of the brain plays a major role in the executive function, people who have frontal lobe injuries have difficulty with high levels of processing. People who have maybe traumatic brain injuries, especially if their front lobe is compromised. A person who maybe had really good memory in the past might have a lapse in memory, might have a lapse in judgment, and that goes not necessarily to an injury. It goes to perhaps the wiring of the brain, like a person with autism. That some folks with autism have executive function difficulties because their ability to organize and sequence isn't there. So we know that this person may have a compromised executive function. But then on the other hand, there are some people with autism that, like Temple Grandin, if you're familiar with Temple Grandin, she talks about, she sees everything linear. and she sees things in 3-dimensional. So she can see things from the start and finish. And so she is, exceptional in the area of executive function. So, and even I would say even Temple, on days where she's overwhelmed with maybe having to go to the airport and do maybe a flight change, she has even said, I get overwhelmed and I can't remember what I'm doing. And that's, one of the things that we do is that, some of these same functions, that the process appears to decline in old age, and those that decline may be used in the early detection of mild dementia, is because that part of the brain in the memory is all due to executive function. So, as I have mentioned before, I am going to use a throat lozenge. I've been dealing with a scratchy throat all day today, so let me put a lozenge in my mouth. So, like I said, it's not just for a person who has who may have mild dementia, may have autism, may have ADD, attention deficit disorder, or attention deficit hyperactivity, or a whole host of issues. I always say, it's not how smart you are, it's how you are smart. And we have coping mechanisms that we help, and we give ourselves like a sticky note on our laptop, so we remember, oh, I got to make that phone call when I'm done with this. Or you make a grocery list. These are all things that we help by managing our time, helps us pay attention, that we can switch focus. We can plan and organize and remember details. We can avoid saying or doing something doing the wrong thing. Saying the wrong thing at a say at somebody's birthday party, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, so I hear that something that would come up that all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I just said the wrong thing. Those are the ways that we know that our executive function is working or not, and then do things based on our experiences, and that we can multitask. We can do something, we can switch and revert back to what we were doing without losing place. Those are all executive function skills. Excuse me, with my lozenge again. It says, so individuals with executive function deficits may have difficulty with processing, such as organization, attention, and mental planning. That includes, for instance, just maybe your son or daughter is coming into the kitchen and they're just standing there. And it's like, you've got school. You need to eat your breakfast, you need to get dressed, and you're constantly saying you need to do these things. The individual, your son or daughter, has just woken up. Their brain is just not up on full speed. So their ability to organize and sequence, although they do this every single day, they do have problems with some executive function. And we can get frustrated, and I understand that, because I've been there. It's just like, really, I have to say this again. I have a 13-year-old grandson, and I have to laugh. I laugh, and I also take pleasure in the fact that it frustrates my daughter because she's always going, Chase, seriously, I said we're going to be leaving. You need to put your shoes on. You need to comb your hair. You need to do that. And then before you know it, he is always the last out of the house. And inevitably, it's like, Jace, do you really want to wear those shoes? And you need a coat? What are you thinking? this young man is an incredibly smart person. He's an Excel reading, he's an Excel math. He is a very intelligent young man, except for he can't organize himself to get out of his own way. He is constantly, he can't remember just some of the simple tasks. And people oftentimes, I hear families will say that about their son or daughters, like, I know they're smart, and yet they still can't get themselves organized to get themselves out the door in the morning. Those are two different parts of the brain. And we have to remember that a person needs certain things in their life, whether we understand that they have an executive function deficit, or their body is not being regulated, and so they're not able to organize this sequence properly, and their executive function is not working well, or they have executive function and it just happens to be compromised. So the difference in the executive function can cause a person to approach the completion of a job or task completely different than it was presented by either a teacher, a parent, a supervisor, or even a job coach. Indication of executive function challenges would be simply overwhelmed by a relatively simple task, just like, I don't even know where to start. So when you ask your son or daughter, I need you to clean your room, they go in and they just stand there, or they sit on their bed. They don't know where to start. Difficulty getting started or knowing what to do when they're finished. Easily being distracted, and then having difficulty re-engaging in the task that they had left to come back to. Viewing a simple problem-solving situation as completely overwhelming. And if you saw my desk, you would go, there's a lady with executive function problems. But having a messy, disorganized work area, even if the individual desires routines and predictability, those can all be indication of executive function challenges. A person feels overwhelmed. They don't know where to start. So executive function is not isolated to people with autism, just like I had mentioned earlier. Many people with executive function difficulties have figured out coping skills, like using a Google Calendar, basically to help them time manage, and you can color code your work priorities. You can break down goals into really bite-sized pieces, do a task analysis so that you know, where do I start and where do I finish? It's sort of like having a recipe. Making a cake, it tells you step by step what to do. And that's really what we need. And individuals that struggle with executive function is a step-by-step way of organizing, and they need coping mechanisms. So executive function can be found in people with mental health impairments, including depression, obsessive compulsive disorders, post-traumatic stress, schizophrenia, bipolar, attention deficit, intellectual and learning disabilities, autism, brain injuries. And like I said, many of us who can be neurotypical without any sort of extenuating disability can find ourselves in a point where we're stuck, where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't think straight. Our coping mechanism would be, I need to sit down and make a list. I need to organize things. We have coping mechanisms, and a lot of people that we work with don't have the coping mechanisms. And that's where, like I said, we're going to be talking about that here later as we go through this evening. So there are the two types of executive function to consider. One is the organization. The person can gather information and structure or arrange the information so it can be evaluated and understood. And then there's the regulation. The person processes the environmental information and determines what he or she should do in response, like how to react, what behavior is needed. Consequently, a lot of folks that we support that are children, that could be, individuals that are students, is just when we have a person has difficulty assimilating to an environment and they maybe are talking too loud, that they're maybe being a little too rambunctious. It's like that person is not assimilating to the environment. You might consider that this person has some executive function, that could be one of the issues, or it could be that they do perhaps have a social communication disorder. But at any rate, it is the organization regulation, which are the two functions of executive function that we're really going to be focusing on. So strategies to support executive function may need to be constantly available in the workplace or at home, even when the person has been working in the same job, has been doing the same task every morning, knows how to do everything, and that they know how to do it. We want to put up visual supports or reminders, not based on the person's typical day, it's based on their worst day. And I give the example of having a person who, how many times have we, let's say, gone to the airport? You have your plane ticket. How many times do you look at that plane ticket? Why can't you remember? I mean, it's what the heck? It's like, okay, what gate it was? And before you can even put it back in your pocket, it's like, oh my gosh, what gate was that? And it's because now your state of alertness, your level of anxiety is compromising your executive function. And so having something that can remind you, this is what you need to do, is what you have the coping mechanism to look at your computer, whether it's on your iPhone or your ticket, whatever it is, you can help yourself. And for folks that don't have the understanding of how to use a visual, or don't know how to reference a visual, or visuals are not put in place for a person, they will continually struggle. So it's by providing visual supports, even when you know the person can do it. It's just on those rare occasions it seems like, gosh, I don't know, I hear some folks, and including as adults, residential providers, they're saying they're being non-compliant, or the child is being naughty, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, when in fact their executive function is not working. It's just like they're just using one oar in the boat. They're just kind of going around in circles. They don't have both oars in the boat. That is something, again, is having something in place so that person is going to be able to reference so that they can stay on task. A little bit more about what I do is what I've been able to do in different parts of the state is that I work providing lean production practices and universal design for learning, as well as visual strategies and communication supports for people with autism. This is what I'm showing you isn't necessarily for a person with an intellectual disability or autism at all. Matter of fact, lean production practices is something that was started in the 1940s, 80 years ago, with Toyota in Japan, that they worked on lean production practices by reducing confusion, reducing waste, increasing quality, and providing independence. And that could be as simply as color coding a workplace or a house. For instance, I have I work with some residential agencies in different counties. At any rate, they might have, 3 people that are living together, and they have challenges that they're constantly coming across, that one of the housemates will go into the other person's room and is constantly going and getting their belongings. They're constantly being redirected, saying, Sam, that's not your room, that's Ted's. Sam, don't go into Ted's room. It's this constant overture or redirection, and basically redirection. By color coding the house, we literally painted the bedroom doors a different color. The same colors matched the food that was in the refrigerator. The same thing has matched with anything that is belonging to one person or another. We have color coded it. So as a reminder, as one of those executive function supports, is that when that person has a reactivity to something and their executive function says, oh, don't get that because that doesn't belong to you, what we're able to do then is help facilitate a reference to be able to say, oh, that color's blue, that belongs to Ted. What color is yours, Sam? Oh, mine's green. So let's go get your green. So you can see the whole difference in what we're saying is I'm providing information and a learning and a teachable opportunity, rather than constantly being that the redirection or the prompting. We are helping a person by giving them something that they can look at and recall to help them manage where they are maybe having a deficit in executive function. Here is another tool, is what we talked about, was regulation or emotional regulation. That we've had some people that have gone from 0 to, oh my gosh, they're ready to blow their head into a million pieces. Was there a hand up? Oh, Krista, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of this, and I've got executive functioning issues, and so does my whole, well, my dad, my son, it's all in the family. And thinking of having worked with people and some of the different things we do for problem solving. I mean, some of the things I work to problem solve, I have a lot of alarms. I have a lot of auditory type things. But some things I purposefully don't accommodate myself on, because I think there are areas where I would end up or I won't accommodate my son on either, because I feel like if we make it too simple, we don't stretch mentally. Or sometimes I want to see if it can be learned, because I don't want to necessarily solve every problem. And I think that's sometimes what happens to us as providers. We focus on solving problems as opposed to accepting life has difficult situations and problems that people need to learn to solve. And so, I was just thinking of that as you're talking about color coding, and, we're the client rights group at People First. So I'm like, hey, client rights, lock on the door, solves the problem and gives somebody more control over their space. But legally it's allowed. Just want to remind, but yeah, in terms of figuring out when to resolve, or to provide that support, and when to maybe, support the fact that the executive functioning may not go away, the issues, but when do we not step in, I guess, would be an
and that's it's a good question and a good comment. And what we want to do is help the individual learn coping mechanism and learn to set things up for themselves for success. Yes, at first we can be as job coaches, as direct support providers, as respite care providers, as parents, that we step in and we do this organization. That does not mean that we continue to do that until the last day or the last breath we draw. It means that's the first step in scaffolding of skills, is that the person understands, oh, this is what helps me regulate and stay on task. The next step of scaffolding of skills is, how do I teach this person to put these things in place for themselves? And then with some coaching, and then the next step is, I can do this independently. Like I said, it's no different from you or I, that we walk around. I mean, I've got my day timer, I've got my online calendar, I've got reminders up the wazoo. And these are my coping mechanisms that I learned, that I've implemented, and then I've sustained. And that's hopefully what we will do with the individuals that we support, is that they will learn how to manage their life with some of these supports. Secondly, we will teach them the skills to how to do it themselves. And then thirdly, they will sustain that for the rest of their life. Like what I do with my day timer. Not only, I've come to the point where it's like, I color code, because again, that's something that's easy for me to do. That's something that it makes things clear, that I can look at in a glance, that I have color coding for things that really are things specific to my son, things that are specific to a county that I'm doing work in, and things that are related to me. So I can look at my calendar and I can decipher what's happening that I sustained. So that's a good point to make, that our first responsibility is to help a person be successful. The second is to help them learn to maintain that type of support. And then thirdly, how is this going to be sustained? And can we, as we all know, we're lifelong learners. We will continue to learn, and we can do these things, and we can actually grow from that. We don't have to say that executive function is a deficit that we have to struggle with. We've got a lot of other things to struggle with in our life. In executive function, there are so many things in our life right now that, with technology, with alarms, with you name it, we can solve and support a person's executive function so that they can go on to other things in their life, like communication and socialization. So I do appreciate that's a really good comment. Don't leave it just at somebody else's responsibility to make sure that these things are in place. We want to help the person learn to be able to put them in place themselves.
Yeah, thank you. And I find that with I need a person-centered strategy, and a lot of times people that are neurotypical, the strategies that they envision would just not work for me. So that's where it really gets interesting, is, I'm old enough now, I need to negotiate that, and I'm fine with self-advocacy. We can do that. But a lot of times when you have neurotypical people trying to determine what's going to work for somebody without a neurotypical brain, their first instinct, sometimes there's multiple ways towards yes. And that's not, sometimes people don't have that creativity in their mind in order to come at problems from different directions. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's another, for instance, helping a person understand, for instance, how big is your problem? I mean, if you've had a toddler, that they, from I'm just playing to all of a sudden the world has come to a screeching halt, and Tommy hit me on my shoulder and I'm so sad, and oh my gosh, everything has to stop. That sometimes continues with some of the individuals that we support, that they don't know the size of their problem. And so we can teach that again by using either a 5-point scale, using like being able to help a person understand, similar to what if you've gone into the emergency room ever before, you can see on the wall, they have, what level of pain, are you in pain? What level of pain are you at? Is it 1 to 10? Because they really want to hone in on how big is your problem. And it becomes very subjective. And what we can do is help people learn what it is and what are the concepts of what small is and what big is. And that all has to do with executive function. Executive function and regulation of supports for time management. You know, people may have trouble managing time, which can affect their ability to mark time as it passes incrementally by minutes and hours. It's interesting, which I haven't said it here, is typically when I'm doing my trainings, I get into a zone, and before I know it, you know, I've maybe promised that they will have a break at a certain time. We're not having a break, by the way. We're just going to go straight through. Then I'll just keep going unless I set a timer. And without a timer, then I will go past the time allotted. So, and it's not because I'm doing this out of malice. I'm doing this because my attention is in some other place, and I need something that's going to help remind me what I need and what I need to be focused on. And having a timer, having something in place is going to certainly help me know, so I don't have to think about that all the time. Matter of fact, today, I was telling Brenda, I had a training this morning, I had a training this afternoon. And so that I could relax, I have to set a timer so that I know on my 15-minute break, I set it for 12 minutes, that I have a time to kind of regroup, go to the bathroom, get some tea or coffee, and that I don't have to look at the time because I've got a timer set. And so my anxiety isn't like, oh my gosh, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? That's something that I use as a coping mechanism. And that could be, again, something, those are things that we are actually taught to use, is how do you use a calendar? How do you tell time? But as a result, for time management, it may be difficult to prepare for or remember work activities that occur later in the week or the month, unless we have something that gives us alarms that we have, we have certain tasks that we need to complete. And that's kind of what I use the color coding in my day timer for. I also use a task outline for the task that I need to complete in a day. I also break things down during the month, so I know that I need to be looking at certain things. So all of a sudden, I'm not having to prepare for training like this, 2 hours before the training, because I did not regulate my time. So it helps us to be good workers, proficient, productive, and relaxed, because I'm not having to worry what's next. We can put those supports and coping mechanisms into place. The regulation supports for time management includes divide large assignments into small tasks or chunks. It is, again, what's that analogy is, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. You can't think about taking it all in. It's small pieces, small little chunks. And it's that same thing, is look at what you need to do, break it down into steps. And like I said, what I do is I start with the task that I need to complete, what it needs, what it looks like at the end, and then I go backwards. And that's something that we can do for individuals that we support to help them learn coping mechanism, like set a timer to sound an alarm after assigning ample time to complete a task, provide a checklist of assignments, plan and structure times of transition and shifts in activities, supply an electronic or handheld organizer, and train on how to use it effectively. Again, that's that sustainability piece that we want. Use a wall calendar to emphasize, specific due dates, and not meaning you, Hattie. I'm just saying, dates that things are due. Use a wall calendar, develop a color-coded system, allow your coworkers, your supervisors, your family members to add entries on the calendar, and to double check entries that other people have added in, so that you can see and perhaps color code, so you know what the expectations are.
I have a question.
Yes.
My son experiences Down syndrome. One of our biggest challenges, I feel, for him, it is I have not successfully learned how to teach him time. And if you don't have a concept of time,
Mhm.
schedules, of course, but can be extraordinary. I can't imagine being inside his brain, because it's how do you have, because I'm very time regulated, and how do you have an idea of maybe what your day is even going to look like. And so my question, I guess, is that a possible an executive functioning thing? And if it is, then surely you have all kinds of tricks to help teach it.
Certainly. There are things that we can use, and teaching concepts can be difficult. And like I said, just, saying I'm going to put in a visual schedule so the person can follow doesn't mean that they're going to do it in the time frame that is needed. They're not going to be able to get out the door and get to school at a certain time. It is, how do we teach the concept of time passing? Or there is a time frame that I need to complete this task to get to the next, so that I know prescriptively, like a recipe, when I'm done, I'll be able to get on the bus and get to school. There are ways. For instance, and if you have used the one right here, is if you use time timers, which is a timer that shows that it's not like a kitchen timer or an egg timer. What it is, and unfortunately this one's broken, but what you would do is set it. So this is set for an hour. And when the red is gone, that means time is up. And so so that the person can be looking at that. It's like, oh, time is passing. I only have this amount of time until the red is gone. And so that is the responsibility on us as care providers to put that in place first. Is we know now that this person doesn't manage their time, or can't manage their time, and they don't recognize the concept of time passing, which is different from an executive function in the way that now we're trying to teach a concept in a different way. And so having a time timer is one of those ways. Another is, and I can give you an example of especially the concept of time passing, because it can seem so ambiguous, because it's like, why can't we do this right now? And I had a gentleman that I'm working with right now with an agency, and we're just in the first part of discovery of the individual getting to know the job coach. This young man has some serious aggression problems and has been aggressive towards the job coach. She's been hesitant to be able to go into the house and to work with him. And so I said, as I provide the technical assistance to be able to go in and say, all right, this is what we want to do, is give him as much information about why we're there, of which we did. And on our first visit, he was doing great until he jumped up and ran into the bathroom. And then his mom was kind of nervous, and she said, I think he's getting water and he's going to throw it on you. I said, then we're done. We're finished. And I said, let's say his name is Ted. Hey, Ted, we're finished. We're going to leave now. And so I left on that note. The next time we came, knowing that is the five considerations that we want to have in place for somebody who is challenged with executive function is, what are you doing? Where are you going to be doing it? What does it look like? When are you going to be done? And what do I need to do next? So looking at those 5 components, I put that in place. So the next time we went to visit Ted, is instead of, I had the schedule for him, I had a social story of what we're going to be doing. Then I put in front of him 4 Post-it notes. And I said, Ted, when these Post-it notes are gone, we will go to our cars and we will leave your house. And he kind of paused, and I took the post-it notes away. And he's continuing he's doing some jigsaw puzzles. This is a guy who does 2 jigsaw puzzles at the same time. He just dumps both boxes into the middle, completely different, and starts working at them independently. And it's like, oh boy. So we wanted to just, really start building that relationship. And so we started doing some interaction and asked him if we could, put something in the puzzle. And he said yes. And as we were going through, I said, hey, Ted, I'm going to take another one of these away. Now we only have 2 post-it notes and we'll be gone. And we continued to do our being together. And then at another point, I said, hey, Ted, we've got 2. I'm going to take one away. And when this last one is gone, we will be leaving for the day. And he continued to do his, we're still doing the puzzles together. And then finally, before he had to get to any level of anxiety, I said, Ted, we're finished. And I took that last post-it away. And he stood up and he walked us to the door and said goodbye. Now, you could have just pushed over his mom, and the dog coach has said, how could post-it notes be that, be successful? And I said, because we were showing him the concept of time passing. Although in that scenario, we were the one in control of time passing. And so I was doing my observation and to see what his anxiety level is, because if I needed to, I would have just taken away all 3 of them, finished, and we're done. But this is one of those areas where we're building trust, that he saw that time was passing, and we stayed probably a good 15 minutes longer than we ever have in the subsequent visits that we have made. So the concept of time passing is something that you have to figure out what it looks like, whether it is a time timer. Sometimes it is people can tell time. I had another young lady that I worked with, and she was doing working, and one of her jobs, what she did was she addressed envelopes. I know you're going to say, well, why didn't she just use a label? Well, she worked for a marketing agency. Interesting enough, there's research that shows that you and I will open letters and messages with handwritten addressing. So they have a person with a disability that is her job, is she just handwrites addresses. At any rate, the job was that she needs to complete at least 50 of those an hour, if not more. By the time when I started working with this agency, employment agency that was supporting her, she was getting 7 done in an hour. She was way behind in the quota that they had wanted. And she said, I keep telling her she needs to hurry up. She needs, we need to get more done. And I said, she needs to know incrementally, how much do I need to be done in a certain time frame? So I did set a time timer, and it was set for 10 minutes that she needed to complete 5 of these addresses in that time frame. And it was interesting. She got that immediately, and she needed that kind of immediate response. She just couldn't wait a whole hour to go, oh, by the way, you've only done 7, you needed 50. We broke it down into chunks. Like I had said earlier, we broke it down into palatable chunks so that she could say, I can get 5 done in 10 minutes. Are you kidding me? And within that first visit, she not only met that, exceeded her 50, because she understood what is the concept. What do you mean by time and my time frame to get something completed? So hopefully, Brenda, that gives you kind of some ideas of the expectation is what time frame are we talking about? When do I need to complete this? And it's going to take some time on our end to set it up for success, that we can build skills for that person to continue with their own coping mechanisms, and then hopefully sustain it in years to come. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So concentration. Part of the executive function deficit is that people may experience decreased concentration, which can be attributed to auditory distractions and or visual distractions, distractions such as an office, just office traffic or employee chatter, or, it could be just, family talking. I mean, it's just opening and closing of elevator doors, common noises, the things that we kind of tune out. That person with executive function, we register, we might look at it, and then we're able to turn back and put our focus on our task at hand. For that person with autism, it's like, oh, like, was it the movie Up that the dog would go squirrel? It's just like his attention was brought somewhere else and he could not bring it back. Well, again, it's just that, how do I get that person back to back on task? So we have to just figure out ways to help that person be able to concentrate. And sometimes that has to do with, how do we define and understand the conditions for a person to have more successful executive function. I mean, I know for me, it depends on what I'm doing, that I will seek out environments to help with, to help me stay motivated. Now, if I'm trying to do some reports, or trying to do a summary on my observation or recommendation for a situation, I need it pretty quiet and I need to be able to think and concentrate. Now, if I want to do like a proposal for a grant, I need to be in a coffee shop where there is a lot of energy, where there's people moving, where I can look and I can watch people. That helps re-energize my brain. So I know, again, that the levels of concentration is dependent on the task that I have, and that we have to remember that that's really, if we want somebody to be successful, let's say in a job, let's say in a classroom, we want to make sure that that environment is conducive to that task, to that learning. Some of executive function available supports that are just literally things that we can do on our everyday is, explore work environments prior to beginning a job, for instance. Again, using lean production practices. If you've ever been in a warehouse, where you can see in this one picture, that's the second one from the left, that there are actually walkways that people know where to go. And then there's another lane that is actually for forklift drivers. Why do we have that? Why can't we all just share it all? Because we would be constantly trying to dodge people, and it's not safe. And obviously someone's going to get hurt. And we use color coding to help us define those areas. We go into the grocery store, by looking around, exactly that there's the meat department, the dairy department, the bakery. On the outside of the grocery store, there are the fresh foods, and all you have to do is look for them. Those supports are already in our environment, and that is to help us narrow down and help us focus on what we need. If you go into some wood shops, and actually this is one of the jobs that I have done, this one job in particular with Habitat for Humanity Restore, is more than one of them. Actually, I've worked in 3 of them, in the state, is to help them, especially with their material, not their materials, but their equipment and tools tend to walk out the door, or they get lost, or there's a multitude of things. And people said, well, we can't even stay on top of what we even have. And so some of the things that I've done is done an illustration on a wall with a pegboard. So if there is a missing item, we need to go look for that. The other thing is, when a person has taken it off the wall, they always know where to put it back on the wall. If we have places to put things, we will remember them and be able to have success in our environment when we have things that are more organized. Having signs, safety first, please wear face coverings. It would be no cell phones, or these are no food, drinks, cell phones, etc. These are all signs that we use throughout our day. This isn't anything that is new. And sometimes we have to go even to a higher degree of support to be able to help people manage when they have executive function problems. For instance, this is a man that I'm working with. He works at a large distribution center in another county here in the state of Washington. And I helped set this, not only for him, help set this, his workstation up. We identified where you're going to be working today. It was in the different color coding sections. And what we would do is he had flags that he would know that through this distribution center, there would be order fulfillments. And so it would, it's yard and, well, actually it's steel is the steel chainsaw, and yard and lawn equipment is what this distribution center is. And so there are parts, there are pieces. And what happens is this person had the job of going and unpacking some of the pieces that when a person is doing order fulfillment, they don't have to open packages, which actually delays the process of getting product out the door. So by having a flag that even showed this is where you started, this is where you need to stop, and then having one that is striped that tells me where I left off the day before, these are all ways that this person can have independence. Creating a visual routine. It was funny, I was just talking about this today. There are some things that it seems like we shouldn't have to repeat. Like, for instance, how do you wash your hands? If you any of us go into a bathroom and we see the sign, employees, before you return to work, wash your hands. And it's like, well, duh. I mean, come on, everybody knows that. And then they show a step-by-step process of how do you wash your hands. Well, that usually it means that, people have different ideas of what washing the hands might look like. And we do know during COVID that there is a process of we need to wash our hands for at least 20 seconds to make sure that they're clean. So we need to have that process in place. And that to have those things in place, you're going to have people that are going to be much more efficient and are meeting basically the rules at work. It's not that the employer or the employee that we don't believe that the person's not going to be able to do it. We do know that people get distracted. And there are some people that do not have a clear expectation of what washing their hands might even look like. So create visual routines so that the person knows what each step of the process is, because otherwise you will be prompting this person until eternity. And we don't want that. And we don't want this person that we support to be always having somebody manage them. We want to be able to help a person be as independent as possible. Here is a situation where it's another young woman that I worked with, and it's not only how much time do I have to do something, but it's the concept of how much. So how much laundry do I put into the wash machine? How much laundry soap do I put into the wash machine? And there are ways, for instance, for this person, we how much we poured. You could pour this jug into a cup that's marked with a red marker that says this is full. Then you put it into the wash machine. That works. It's a little cumbersome, but that works. Or you can eliminate all the steps and just get a pod that you can drop into the machine that they would get their clothes clean. Or in this case, the employer didn't want to pay for the pods, but I was able to design a pump so that all we had to do is teach the individual that when they do their laundry, you pump 3 times laundry soap into the wash machine. That answered the, basically the guessing game of how much do I need to put into it. Teaching those concepts, it's one thing. Helping a person understand how much looks like is a critical thinking executive function. And like I said, we have to oftentimes put things in place so that they know, what does it mean? Excuse me. So priming, using visuals, prior to a work week or work day, review its schedule with a person. This may include both work and personal life. Also review the supports that will be used to complete the job. So you will start your work on Friday. Before you start work, you need to purchase black pants. On Thursday, you will need to check your work ready and have your clothes ready before you go to work, before you go to school, work, school, whatever. Priming can be as simple as, for somebody who has problems organizing themselves in the morning, what I did for this one gentleman is the night before, when he is calm, he doesn't have a lot of anxiety, he will put his clothes in the red section of his closet. And all I did was wrap red duct tape around the rod that showed any clothes, the clothes that he needs to wear, like his pair of pants, his shirt, and his jacket, are all going to be on a hanger in that red section. So in the morning, when he gets up, he knows that's where my clothes are. Or it's the same as laying out your clothes the night before. This is a concept that, the person could be there, they get their clothes ready even, a couple of days before an activity. I'm going to put it in the red zone so I know what I can do. So Teresa says, and I'm sorry, I just delayed. It's something we have done is using events and identifiers throughout the day. I would always describe what we will do at that time frame, like we have to go after breakfast time, and that has helped us. Absolutely. You're giving a first then, after, it's giving a point in time that after something is finished, another activity is going to start. And that again is another way to measure and give a person the concept of time passing, is after a certain activity, another one will start. That's a great example. The other is, put your backpack with all the tools, the things that you might need, like a bus pass, your phone, your name tag, on a lanyard, the money that you need, because in the morning, again, your ability to remember all the things that you need to do and get yourself ready, get yourself dressed, bed, and out the door. For some people, that can be too difficult, and their ability to process all that information can be really compromised. And oftentimes there are times where people will refuse to leave the house because just getting themselves ready was too overwhelming. So if we can eliminate that anxiety and get them the supports that they need prior to an activity, when that time comes, they don't have to fuss and fret about getting themselves organized, or having mom or dad or have the residential support provider say, hurry up, you're going to be late for the bus. Because all that does is add pressure, and that person's ability to prioritize and to organize is just out the door. If possible, have a storage locker that a person can, like even at a workspace, even at school. This isn't rocket science. That's why schools have lockers, why gymnasiums, why swimming pools all have lockers, because otherwise people would be laying things around and you wouldn't be able to identify and have a personal space around your materials or your belongings. So have a place where you put things that correlate with what you like. I put my swimming suit here when I go swimming. It goes, not my swimming suit, but my towel and my flip-flops, they all go here, so I remember where they are at, and I have a locker for that. A working memory is another one of the deficits of executive function, is that people experience memory deficits, which can affect their ability to complete a task, remember job duties, recall daily actions or activities. There are times where my computer is literally covered with Post-it notes, or on my desk, or on my day timer. Oh yeah, I got to remember that. I even put Post-it notes on my mirror in the morning. I'll do it at night to remember to get gas in the morning, because I'll forget and I'll wait until the last minute. I run out the door and say, doggone it, I have to get gas before I get there and I'm going to be late. So I have to remind myself, which is going to help me really pace myself in the morning. I got to remember, I got to leave at least 10 minutes early so that I can get gas. So people who experience the memory deficits, we can obviously provide them with a written instruction or checklist, allow use of a recorder, allow additional training time for a new task, offer training refreshers, provide minutes of meetings and training information, visual flow charts to indicate steps of a task, provide verbal or visual cues, use color coding, use notebooks, planners, sticky notes, use sticky notes as reminders of important dates or tasks, provide labels or bulletin board cues to assist in the location of items. Again, it's just kind of I am just trying to reemphasize that some of these tools help in a multitude of ways. And basically what it does, it helps us, again, it gets us to the point where we are no longer anxious, our executive function can kick in, and we can start and end a process when we have some supports that are functional for us that we can follow. Attendance. Individuals may have difficulty getting to work or getting to school promptly because of varied activities, processes, and interruptions they may experience while they're trying to get out the door. And it could be as much as, I'm eating breakfast. Now I can't find my shoes. Where are my shoes? I had my shoes. They were just here. Well, now I don't know where my socks are. My favorite pants aren't washed. I didn't know I needed to get them washed. So all of this is just another compounding effect. So it affects a person's attendance, is because when a person has to struggle with organizing themselves, they oftentimes they give up. They don't want to have anything to do with it because it is too overwhelming. It's simple as having a checklist. The one that I have here represents, a timeline for those who can tell time and can manage their activity within those timelines. Other is, similar to what Teresa had said, is after lunch, I need to make sure, or after breakfast, I need to get dressed because I need to get on the bus. It gives a time or a concept of a time frame. Using a time timer, using Post-it notes. These are all things that by using a visual written schedule or a picture schedule is going to help what needs to come next. And it tells me what's expected of me. What am I supposed to do? And for this instance, what does my employer want me to do? Or what does my teacher want me to do, etc. Organization for memory supports through visual supports, quick fixes using sticky notes, reminders when needing a quick visual support. There are other things that I might use. Like if I'm in the car, I might send myself a message, or I will, I just use Alexa, send me a reminder that I need to pick up dog food before I go home. We have technology in our life, and it's the process of us actually implementing them that's going to help us stay on task and help us know what is next. So this is an example of a young lady that, again, another person I was working with. And what would happen is that her task was, she worked at a church, and they had somebody who was coming in to archive their records, and then they wanted somebody to do the shredding of some of the personal documents, and that was her job. Is she would do some of the archival of scanning documents, and then she would do the shredding. And what would happen is that she sometimes would get so overwhelmed that she would see this huge box, because everybody would just dump the papers. Everybody that's archiving would dump all these papers into this box, and it was her responsibility. And it would be one of those, like a refrigerator packing box. It was huge, and it was full of paper. She would become so overwhelmed, and the job coach would say, well, come on, let's get going. We need to do this. We need to get things shredded. Well, I can tell that she waited for the job coach to put the paper up. She said, let's get this done, and then we can take a break. And so she was being prompt dependent. And I said, what would be really a good concept is, what we can teach her is by giving her a stack of paper, the expectation that she needs to complete all of these before she leaves. But we're going to color code that she first needs to get to the green Post-it note, then she can have a break. Then she goes back to work and she finishes the paper to the yellow sticky note. And then when she completes that, the red, then she needs to clean up, etc. We did this partly for her to understand what was expected of her to do the job, but we also built this in place so that she didn't run too much paper through, and then the shredder would become overheated. So it was kind of a win-win to help her. She wanted to have the breaks, but we did it in a way that was structured, that gave her how much work am I responsible for, and in what time frame, so that this person can watch time and know how to manage a task, and that it doesn't become so overwhelming that they can't finish. Social skills is another executive function. It's the executive function to assimilate to a social situation that, like I said, we oftentimes, just through exposure as young as, as a young child, when children are in preschool, they learn the social rules. They learn to stand in line. They learn that we share toys. These are all things that are related to executive function. And so some of this may manifest itself as interrupting others when working or talking, or demonstrating poor listening skills, or the inability to communicate effectively with somebody. These can be signs that this person has an executive function deficit. So we look at an executive function assessment is, let's say, a workplace task or environment. And again, I'm using workplace, but this could be as much as your kitchen, the bedroom, bathroom, the classroom. Is how much planning and organization is required for this task. So we need to consider it needs to be an individual approach, and that the individual is able to accomplish the needed planning and organization mentally, or will tools be needed for this person? We also need to consider, is he or she able to complete all the steps of the task without your assistance, without prompting them? Does the individual currently use tools, or will these need to be identified? So once we identified, what we want to do is make sure that we have it in place, that again, not only are we putting things in place, that we are putting it in place so that we can help the person develop the skills that they can follow, that the next step to that is the sustainability, that they're able to set it up themselves so that they can work as independently as possible. The next would be, oops. What types of work or what type of tasks are to be completed? You know, review minor or routine tasks as well as the primary work to be accomplished. So as simple as a teacher saying, all right, what we're going to do today is I need you to read chapter 3 and then write a summary on Noah's position on a certain situation. Well, there's an inference that is provided there, which says you're going to write it, you're going to read, and you're going to write. So I need a book, I need paper, I need a pencil, and I need to accomplish it in a certain amount of time. That all takes executive function. And there are times where we have to make sure that they have, you know, does the individual understand what needs to be completed, that they're aware of the different tasks and the tools needed for that activity, and that will they be able to accomplish that independently. Again, what materials are needed and how are they obtained? Again, one of those things that gets stuck with many of our kids, it's like all of a sudden, I don't have a pen, I don't have paper, or I don't have my iPad. I don't know how to do the next step. What materials are needed? Can the person set up their own tasks so they can complete it? Or is it that somebody else needs to set it up for them initially? Is he or she able to gather material to complete their task, such as, you know, for instance, in this case, a worker, office supplies or cleaning materials? Or it could be that I have paper and pen, and that I have all the tools, that I have my greeting card, that I want to write a nice, write a thank you letter to my grandmother. How do I do all of those pieces? And it is, we make assumptions that yes, the outcome is that they want to have a card for, let's say, to write to grandma for thanking them for their Christmas present, but they don't know how to gather the materials just to get the task done. So, you know, like I said, it's oftentimes not the fact that the person doesn't have the want and the desire to do it, is that they get stuck. You know, where does the work to be completed? Is it going to be in in multiple locations? Thinking about a student, even in middle school, that they're going to be in different classrooms. What do I need for each classroom when I leave, you know, in my backpack, I leave for school in the morning? Do I have all the things I need for the school, for the classes I have today? Middle school, high school, college. These are all things that a person needs to start thinking about. Is the individual comfortable in the environment? If the task requires moving between multiple areas, how well does the individual transition? Again, when you think about transitioning, it's leaving one activity and going to another. It's reestablishing a whole new organization. It's reestablishing that learning environment. And those, especially for people with executive function deficits, transitions can be a very, very difficult process to try and manage. Scroll through here. I want to get to some. So how much is to be completed? Again, that harkens back to the concept that we're talking about, is how much time or how much do I use? It's all about the supports that we can put in place. Does the person know how to complete the entire task or the project? Are they able to leave a task or a job or an assignment that's not completed And do they know how to go back to it and start off where they left? Is there a clear beginning and end? That is also one of those, is how do I initiate a task and know all the steps in between to complete a task? And the considerations that you need for that is have a consistent routine and step to the task to be completed. That we help the person be able to tolerate variability in what the task and modify what needs to be done. We need to, the expectation, again, let's say we want to have Thomas finish his homework before he comes home at night. Well, does Thomas have the tools that he needs to complete the task? Does he know that what are the steps that he needs to do is before he leaves school, he can do his homework, or he can do his homework at lunchtime, or he can do some of the work on a break. These are, some of the ways that we can help the person be able to cut down and put into chunks the routines and the steps to the task so that they can complete it as independently as possible. Again, to answer, is there a specific time allotment for completing the work? That concept of how much time do I have in place is, can he or she monitor their time and adjust the work pace accordingly? And if not, let's ask that question. What are some of the supports we can put in place? Is it clear what to do with the completed work and what to do next? Is it that the person knows how to complete a task from start to finish and then move on to what is the next expectation? So Thomas was able to get up this morning, put his backpack by the front door, was able to get dressed and put his shoes on. But did he eat breakfast? Did he remember to wear his coat that he was supposed to put on? That he was able to do part of it, but not all of it? How was the individual able to complete things? And was it independently, or did somebody have and need to prompt him into each of the steps past the ones that he was able to do independently? Does the task require working as a team or alone? That's big when you think about school, when you think about sharing a residence with somebody, does the person have the skills to work as a team? Because that takes a lot of organization. I mean, as you folks know, as working with peace, you all have a piece of the puzzle. You all have a piece and a task to do. You're all not doing the same thing, but we all know and we define what it means to work as a team. And sometimes that the social components and the social aspects of working in the team can be compromised for a person who has an EF deficit. How much distraction in the environment? We talked about that. What types of environment are going to be conducive to somebody completing the task or being able to shift their focus from one thing to another and get back to the task at hand? Do they need to have an environment that's going to be more quiet or more stimulating? Executive function skills are the foundation for building skills for independence. When individuals struggle to begin or stay on task or problem solve a certain situation, the teacher, job coach, parent, and others will often prompt and direct the individual to complete the task. And what unfortunately that does is there's a couple things that can happen. One, we create a person who becomes prompt dependent, and or the person becomes very resistant because they know what to do, doggone it. And they just can't organize themselves in a way to get it completed. And yeah, it was interesting this morning. I did a training on communication, and the second part was on adaptations and modifications. And one of the things that happens a lot, as oftentimes as teachers, job coaches, parents, etc., is that we want to rescue a person. We want to jump in so that they can have success. We want them to get something complete, when our role should be we want to help coach them to become as independent as possible. And that's going to be through working through some of the struggles, working through how can we help this person be as independent as possible using some adaptations or modifications rather than sometimes getting into power struggles. Situations and solutions. Let's say an individual who has difficulty with a few of his least preferred tasks will leave them until the last minute. Do any of us do that? That's human nature, for heaven's sakes. And then this method of task completion was causing him to miss deadlines or miss the bus or wasn't able to go to recess because he wasn't able to complete his assignment. So we want to help that person structure the day so that they can work on tasks that are really the most troublesome that they're able to do first thing in the morning and get that out of the way. And that we can help them by organizing their day so that they can meet, really what the timelines are. People having problems completing paperwork efficiently and effectively. This may be due in part to a workplace distraction or difficulty with time management, disorganization, and prioritization. What's important? How do I get it done? Why is it important to prioritize environmental supports and tools? Well, basically, it's essential that a team pay close attention to the level of people's prompts that are provided, and instead of building strategies and environmental supports to allow the person to be more independent. We want to early use the least restrictive prompts for a person with autism or anyone with an executive function deficit. Will give individuals the tools to live a higher quality of life. And then these tools include strategies such as visual supports, jigs, mobility, mobile technology. I mean, the basic what I'm talking about throughout this whole process is universal design for learning. How do we put things in place so that all people, regardless of their disability, whether they're a visual learner, whether they're an auditory learner, whether they are, they have problems with organizing and sequencing because they have an executive function deficit, is that when we provide as much information to meet the majority of people, we can then individualize what's going to be necessary for specific people, but we want to broaden our repertoire of supports to meet the majority of people's needs. So why is it important to prioritize environmental supports and tools? Well, I can tell you, when any of you who've ever worked in a school, have worked in any industry, you know exactly where the first aid kit is and where the fire extinguisher is. I mean, those are things that they're supposed to be in prominent places, where the exit signs. These prioritize what's important. Well, it's got to be the same for us, that we are using things in a proactive plan to teach and employ tools and strategies for independence, and that we want to implement throughout the person's environment, whether it's home, work, and be proactively preparing a worker for inevitable issues that may arise. For instance, Ted is getting ready for work. He's, got himself dressed. He's got everything ready, and C-Van is late. There is that window. It's a half hour before or a half hour after. And now he's waiting and waiting. So you have somebody who could be waiting for close to an hour for that bus, for that window of opportunity that the bus will be there. That could be something that is, how do we help that person fill their time? And it could be that all of a sudden, like yesterday, out of the blue, we had snow. And then you have something that's like, oh, we have no school today. What's your plan B? How do we help that person understand that there are inevitable things that can arise? And how do we help them cope? Because part of our executive function is the ability to self-modulate emotions. So when we're mad and upset, do we go around stomping our feet, slamming doors, yelling at people, or do we learn self-modulation? That is like, I need to take some deep cleansing breaths. I need to go for a walk. I need to clear my mind. Those are coping mechanisms. And a person with executive function that is left to their own devices may engage in something that may actually look like a behavioral issue when it's literally an emotional regulation consideration. Again, here's a situation where I had, and this was, we fortunately don't have these in our community any longer, but we had, I worked for providing technical assistance for a sheltered workshop. And one of the situation was that people that came in, there were like 18 people that worked at this sheltered workshop. They would come in on a bus all together at the same time. They were staff to greet them, and then they would help them put books, not their books, they would put their backpacks, their coats away, and then they would help them into their work site. And what this was doing is it was not teaching anybody any new skills. In fact, it was causing more dependence on the employees and costing the agency a lot of money. When I went in, I was able to define, different work areas, identify where a person was supposed to be just by using colored objects. So a person was able to transition using their blue cone. They knew what chair they were going to go to, what table, what door, what activity that they were going to be doing, and they could do it independently. And it was just by showing them one time that they were able to match and knew where they were supposed to go, through what door, at what chair do they sit, and at what table or what task do they need to complete. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. A place to begin with developing supports for executive function and challenges includes collecting information, successes, strategies, and challenges. And then from current and past environment assessments, even the IEP, the person-centered service plan, we want to collect this information and find out, where have we been? Where do we need to go next? Because if we don't have a plan, what's the analogy? If you don't have a plan, don't be surprised at where you end up. You can always change a plan, but if you're constantly changing and you don't have a plan for your day, what happens is that things don't get done. And you're like, where in the world did my day go? I did that. Well, I think I was just telling you before this, it's like, where in the heck has my life gone? I've got a 40-year-old and 38-year-old, my gosh, but that aside, I can look at a day that I'm thinking, what did I get done today? But if I have my checklist, I can also go through and I can check off, these are the things I did do and I was able to accomplish. Otherwise, I could spend, all of a sudden I'm watching TikTok and I just spent an hour and a half gone down a rabbit hole and going, I'm on Amazon because I want to find, them, I don't know, a new pencil sharpener. I can find ways to occupy my time to it can be a time sucker like you won't believe. But if I can set my timer and I can say, I'm going to give myself a half hour just relax and do something like that, or I'll find myself, I don't know if people I had to actually qualify this for somebody the other day. I said I actually have books that I pick up, hold in my hand, and I read. And I do that at night before I go to bed. And sometimes it's a story is really good or the book is really good. Before you know it, it is 3 o'clock in the morning and I have to get up at 7. And I'm kicking myself the next day thinking, what in the world did I do? So I have to set my timer for that as well, because I know if I get too involved, I will be there. I mean, I might wake up or not wake up in the morning. I'm still awake. I haven't gone to sleep yet. All right. And this is, again, it's, because this is a training that I did around career exploration, but this really goes for any task, any activity, anything that we want, that we need to do ourselves, or we need to ask of the person that we serve, support, care for. It's consider the types of executive functioning inputs that might hinder that person's work performance. Proactively look at the organizational challenges to help that person. And we had talked about, there are things that, although many of us feel that we are good at multitasking, there is research that says that especially women are often put into situations that we need to multitask, but it doesn't mean that if we didn't do one thing just at a time that we wouldn't actually have better outcomes. It just means that we have usually a lot of tasks that are put on us at the same time. We just tend to have better executive function, that we can jump from one thing to another. And we have coping mechanisms that it seems like we're able to multitask, when in fact we do. Oftentimes women have better executive functioning than men. Just saying, I'm putting it out there, I'm saying it. And that we know that many people have difficulty performing one task at more than one task at a time. The difficulty could occur regardless of the similarity of the task or the frequency of performing a certain task. And so when we tell our son or daughter, for instance, I'm getting my son ready to go to the doctor, and if, some of you know me, some of you don't know me, I am habitually late. I don't know what it is. I am always late. And when I'm early, I know there's almost a panic, like, did I make the wrong appointment? I don't see people here. But at any rate, I am unfortunately one of these persons that late. And if you know Darla, she's also late. We're kind of like two peas in the pod in that regard. Now I forgot the issue that I was talking, but it is this is what I'm going to, is getting to work on time, getting things done on time, is that whole executive, the time management. How do we support ourselves during the day is going to help us get to what we need to do for the next, the management of our time, our ability to even get our family out the door, are all that we have to make sure that we keep in mind, is having a routine of putting and keeping in things in their place. Similar to what I showed, that, when I come in the door of my house, I always put my coat and my purse at the door, because the one thing I hate in the morning is having to go look for my purse or my shoes or my cell phone or my keys. It just puts me into a really snarky kind of day. So having a routine of putting really important things in certain places so you know where they're at. Prepare for the next day by prepping the things that you need to have out so that you are ready for the next day. The things I might not be that good with myself personally, I certainly am good with my work attitude and finishing projects, is because I know myself. I have certain standards that I want to live up to. So I make sure I break things down into chunks. If I've got 4 weeks to complete it, I want to complete that at least in 3.5 weeks. I want to give myself a little bit of a buffer to make sure that I'm not pushed at the last minute, because I want something quality that comes out. And so these are things that I want to make sure that are in place, that what these things are important to me, they should be important for somebody else who's, if you want them on time, if you want their products to be on time, that they have things that they've prepared the night before, that they have a checklist, that they place sticky notes on the door or on the dashboard, any place that the person can see them. We want to turn off distractions, including cell phones. We want to set a timer or something that's programmable, so that we can pace ourselves, so we can make sure I can get 5 envelopes addressed in 10 minutes, so that I can make sure after an hour, 50 minutes to an hour, I can complete what the expectations are and the responsibilities I have in place. So I had mentioned before is, you know, what is expected of me? Where do I need to be? How much, like the time passing or the amount of work I need to complete? What does finished look like and what's next? Those are, we can answer that by making sure we have a daily schedule in place. What's expected of me? What am I supposed to do? What does my employer want me to do? What does my parent want for me to do? The organization and prioritizing. It's the next part is, again, the what. It's a mini schedule that says, I'm going to Trexel Accounting. I'm going to hang up my coat. I'm going to do a time clock, pick up my work at my desk, do data entry, set the time timer so I know how much, the what I'm going to be doing. Visual organization. It's going to be the where. Where am I going to be? It could be I'm color coding, so I know where. I don't have to think about it. I can get my task done if I'm using color coding and I know where I need to stand or where I need to work and I'm not working at somebody else's desk. Using lean production practices that tells the person, where do I walk? Where does the forklift go? It can be as much as a health and safety consideration. Boundaries, by color coding. This incident is by showing the different colors on people's doors that shows them, this door belongs to Jason, this one is Teddy's, and this one's Joshua's. That also shows by the food containers, things that can help a person know who belongs to what. It's interesting. Like I said, lean production practices really puts this in, it emphasizes by using color coding, by using, certain tasks have certain colors and certain colors are associated with the tools that are within the locations. So you are eliminating a lot of the questions. It means that there's work up front, but it certainly can help. Like in this instance, Teddy, that's not yours. Rather than we can say, Teddy, show me where your room is. What color is your room? So we're not reprimanding Teddy. We are asking him to help us understand what he would be doing. The how much, using a time timer. How much, this is something I set up for a young man who, his job of all things, one of his special interests were travel trailers. Well, actually, he preferred Class A RVs, not mobile home, Class A RVs, the big, beautiful things, and that was one thing he loved to do. I was able to customize a job for him. That what he did is new travel trailers that came in to basically, it was Poulsbo RV Center. They would get these new travel trailers that came in from the makers. And what he would do is he would go through and he would need to clean. You would think something that would come from the factory would be clean, and they weren't. They needed some washing the windows. They needed somebody to go in and actually trim the silicone that had overspilled from the seals that they had put on. There are a lot of tasks that need to be done. And what he needed to know when, time, how much do I need to do? And what he wanted to work up to is that he had several tasks, but what he would do is that how many travel trailers do I need to clean today? And he was just doing the outside, not the inside. So he was washing windows. So we would have something that would show, just by these little fold down, you can see in the one that I'm circling, I actually have so you can see that you can count down, you've done 4 or 5, you've got 2 more to do, 1 more to do, and now you're finished. So we had something that when he would finish, he would just flip over the sign flip over the number. So now he knows how many more he has. Have any of you ever gone to, Zumba or jazzercise in the day or any place that is actually having somebody who's leading an exercise class, or that you're having, there's an activity that they're saying, all right, we're going to do 5 of these. All right, we only have 3 more. We only have 2 more. We have people that start counting down for us, because when we're in the heat of doing something, we often forget, how much more of this can I endure? It's when we know I only have 3 more to do, I can get this done. It's the same analogy that we're using for a person who has difficulty of figuring out how much am I supposed to be doing? I won't get into this one. That's again for this other gentleman. The how much, again, the guessing game is turn it into clear expectations. This is again another person who I just showed you the shredding, that we were able to figure out what it means for him to get this job completed. This was another situation of where and how much. This is a young man who worked at a large golf course and they had a huge driving range. And what he did, his job or his task was, there was basically a ball collector that would go through and pick up all the range balls that were on the driving range at the golf club, at the driving range, excuse me. But there were some that would get caught behind trees or in between trees where this ball collector could not pick up. So his job was to go through and to use a ball shagger and pop all the balls and pick them up and put them into a bucket. So there was a lot of concepts to try and help him understand, what does finished look like? What does full look like? What are the expectations? The where do I work? How much? What does full look like? I can tell you, we went through this process of, letting him know what are some of the tools, the where, and you need to pour all the balls into the bucket with the red lip. We're going to outline either with rope or with cones, the areas that need to be cleaned. We're going to tell you that you need 3 buckets to complete, and the buckets need to go on the wagon so you can take it back to the ball shack so they can be cleaned. So it's always, helping the person understand the concept of full. How many full buckets do I need to be finished? What does finished look like? How many? So I can do the one, I only have 2 left. I only have 3 left. I'm finished with this task. So the next step is, or you can check things off. So the same concept is being used. And, again, I am the queen of Post-it notes. It's how do we help this person be as independent as possible is going to take time. This, for instance, there are literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of balls all over the place. It is probably one of the biggest golf courses that I've ever been at. And I want to say, it was 2 stories. At any rate, there were a lot of areas that balls need to pick up. So how do you help this person know where finish look like when there is a field of balls? And what I did is I put cones out and I would show in one area, you've got the balls here. It needs to look like the one on the right where there aren't any balls. So I need to teach this person the concept of what does finished look like. I won't get into that piece, right? That was related to a specific job. Critical thinking all comes from our ability to our executive functions ability. It's higher order skill. It's by creating, evaluating, analyzing, applying, understanding, remembering. It's like I said, it's a very high order skill. And oftentimes because a person, let's say, they have a higher reading aptitude, they have a higher math aptitude, doesn't mean that they have a high order of critical thinking, that they know how to organize and sequence themselves. how do we know a person with autism or anyone is affected by critical thinking difficulties? Is there's the one thing is looking at mind blindness or theory of mind, knowing the perspective from somebody else's position. It underpins much of the social difficulty for a person with autism. The critical thinking is the ability to rise above a problem. Who is doing what seems to be the reason for what's happening, and what are the end results, and how could they change? That's critical thinking. And again, that all harkens back to our ability to problem solve. That's the executive function, to organize the sequence. So I am not going to go into theory of mind because that has nothing really to do with critical thinking that we were just talking about. So I'm going to just skip up here. I'm almost done for this evening. So I just wanted to kind of review, some of the things that we really focused on tonight was executive function and critical thinking and support strategies that are going to help a person, again, learn the process of what are the expectations, organize the sequence, help with memory, helping to stay on the task, helping to go from one task and back to another. These are all things that are all related to an executive function. When we have tools in place, like a visual list, like even, it could even be a verbal prompting, an output, but it is something other than a person prompting that we don't want a person to become dependent upon. We want to teach that independence as much as possible. Those are the things that we can do to help people who in our lives that we love, that we support, that we want to help them to be as independent as possible. Like I said, not having good executive function is not a measurement of intelligence. It's a measurement of how your brain works. And it's not how smart you are, it's how you are smart. And how you are smart is going to be by the ways that you have put coping mechanisms to help you manage and organize your life. So that's what I have for you this evening. That's a lot of information, and hopefully you were able to get some information or ideas that maybe you would consider for either your son or daughter or people that you support, that it's not that people are trying to drive you crazy, that they're not meeting the expectations that you have for them in the morning or at night, getting them ready for bed or finishing their schoolwork. It is a process of executive function, and there are the whole host of things all in between that. So any of you have any questions? Kay said the word jig is new to me. A jig is something that you might use how do I say this? A jig might be something like, I'm trying to think things that you use in the kitchen. A jig might be a cookie cutter would be considered. Well, that's actually a template, but it could be a jig as well. It just helps the person identify where they're supposed to be, or it might be that you use a clamp to, or you might use a magnet, or you might use things that help steady a piece of material, a schedule, a work system. That can be a jig. Oh, you haven't heard it either, Brenda? Yeah. If you do a Google search and just say templates and jigs, it's going to come up